Here's a question nobody asks out loud. Why do people who earn $150,000 a year still lie awake at night doing math in their heads? Not poor people. Not people who lost their jobs. People with good careers, nice houses, 2 cars in the driveway staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. because their checking account just dipped below $1,000 again. If you've ever had that moment, I need you to stay with me for the next 10 minutes, because what I'm about to tell you isn't about budgeting apps or cutting your coffee. It's about something much bigger. Something that determines whether your next 20 years feel like freedom or a slow, quiet trap. My name is James, and I've spent years studying not just how money works, but how money feels. The psychology behind why smart, hardworking people keep making the same expensive mistakes. And what I found surprised even me. Here's the uncomfortable truth about your 40s. This is probably the highest earning decade of your life. You've climbed, you've grinded, you finally make real money. And yet, statistically, this is also when Americans feel the most financially stressed. How is that possible? Bank of America research shows that even among high-income households, lifestyle creep is the #1 driver of financial anxiety. Federal Reserve surveys show roughly half of Americans feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck. And here's the part that stops people cold. That number barely changes between income brackets. You're not broke, but you're not free either. There's a word for that state. Behavioral economists call it the scarcity mindset. And once you understand what it does to your brain, you'll never look at your monthly expenses the same way again. Researchers Senthil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir spent years studying what financial stress actually does to human cognition. What they found was alarming. When people feel like their resources are stretched when every dollar is already spoken for, the brain enters what they call tunneling. You lose the ability to think long-term. Your entire mental bandwidth gets consumed by one question: how do I get to Friday? This isn't a character flaw. This is neuroscience. And here's the brutal part. It doesn't matter if you earn $40,000 or $200,000. What triggers tunneling isn't your income. It's the gap between what comes in and what's already committed to go out. Someone earning $200,000 a year with $195,000 in fixed expenses experiences the same cognitive narrowing as someone who's genuinely struggling. The brain doesn't care about your salary, it cares about your margin. And that word margin is the most important financial concept nobody talks about. Let me show you 2 people. Same income, completely different futures. Person A looks successful. Big house in a great school district, 2 new cars, nice vacations, the full picture. But underneath, 75% of their income is locked into fixed costs before the month even starts. There's no cushion. When the furnace breaks, it goes on a credit card. When a great job opportunity comes along that requires a little risk, they can't take it. They're not building. They're performing. Person B drives a car that's 5 years old, lives in a house that's slightly smaller than what they could afford. From the outside, less impressive, but they have something person A doesn't. They have margin. 25 to 30% of their income isn't already spent. When something breaks, it's an inconvenience, not a crisis. When an opportunity appears, they can say yes. Here's what's wild. Person B isn't necessarily making more money. They're just making different decisions, specifically decisions about fixed costs. Because here's what most people miss. A raise helps you once. Cutting a fixed expense helps you every single month for the rest of your life. Let me make this concrete, because this is where most financial content goes soft, and I'm not going to do that. The average new car payment in America right now is $750 a month per car. Most households have 2. That's $1,400 every single month, money that's gone before you've bought a single grocery item. Here's what that actually costs you. That $700 a month difference between financing 2 new cars versus buying reliable used ones. Outright invested in a basic index fund at a conservative 7% real return becomes over $100,000 in 10 years from one decision: cars. Now, housing. The Department of Housing and Urban Development defines cost-burdened as spending more than 30% of your income on housing. Over 50% of renter households and nearly a quarter of homeowners with mortgages already exceed that threshold. Recent analysis shows the typical American family would need to spend 38% of their income just to cover mortgage payments on a median-priced new home. If you locked yourself into an oversized mortgage at 38, you could be paying for that decision until you're 68. Meanwhile, the average 401k balance for Americans in their 40s sits around $150,000. Northwestern Mutual. Research shows Americans think they need $1.26 million to retire comfortably. You don't need me to do that math. You feel it already. So why do smart people keep walking into this? 4 traps, and they're designed to be invisible. Trap 1: lifestyle creep. You get a raise. Within 6 months, your expenses quietly rise to match it. It doesn't feel like a decision. It just happens. A slightly nicer car. A slightly bigger apartment. A few more subscriptions. And suddenly your raise is completely gone absorbed into a higher cost of living that now requires the next raise just to maintain. The fix? When you get a raise, redirect at least half of it to savings before you adjust your lifestyle. Let your life get better. Just make sure your savings get better faster. Trap 2: savings as a spending reward. You hit $50,000 saved, you buy a boat, you build your emergency fund, you take an expensive vacation. I understand the impulse, you worked hard for that money. But every time you treat your savings like a piggy bank, you reset the clock on compounding. And in your 40s, you cannot afford to reset the clock. Trap 3: the housing upgrade spiral. You have equity. Rates looked good for a while. So you refinanced, upgraded, got more space. The house is worth more on paper. But now you have a bigger monthly obligation every month for the next 30 years. That's not wealth. That's a longer sentence. Trap 4: car payments that never end. Nearly 20% of new car buyers are now committing to payments over $1,000 a month. More than 22% are taking out 8 4-month loans. 7 years. By the time it's paid off, you're ready to buy another one. It's a treadmill, and the treadmill doesn't care how hard you're running. None of these are moral failures. Our entire economy is engineered to make all of them feel completely normal, but normal and optimal are not the same thing. Here's what changes everything. 3 to 6 months of expenses sitting in a savings account. Not invested, not exciting. Just there. Federal Reserve data shows only about 55% of Americans have that cushion, which means nearly half of adults in this country are one bad month away from a financial crisis. But here's what nobody tells you about an emergency fund. The return on it isn't measured in interest, it's measured in cognitive freedom. When that cushion exists, your phone buzzing at night stops being a threat. When the car needs a repair, it's a Tuesday problem, not an existential one. And when your brain stops burning energy on financial survival, something incredible happens. You start noticing opportunities you were too stressed to see before. This is what I call walk-away money. Not enough to retire, but enough that you're never making decisions from desperation. Think about what that does to your career. When your boss asks you to cross a line, you can push back. When a risky opportunity comes along, you can consider it. When a negotiation happens, you're playing offense instead of begging. Financial margin doesn't just improve your bank account. It changes the quality of every decision you make. So here's what I want you to walk away with. Not a list of things to cut, not a complicated system. One shift in perspective. Stop evaluating financial decisions by what they cost this month. Start evaluating them by what they cost you over the next 20 years. That $45,000 car? At 7% real returns over 20 years, you didn't spend $45,000. You gave up $174,000. That oversized mortgage? Every extra $500 a month you're paying isn't just $500. It's $500 every month for 30 years, money that could have been compounding since you were 40. Your 40s are not a deadline. There is still time. You still have decades of compounding ahead of you. But the margin for error is shrinking, and the decisions you make right now will echo forward into your 60 seconds in ways that nothing you did in your 30 seconds ever could. Small changes compound too. You don't have to blow up your life overnight. You just have to start making decisions that your 6-0-year-old self will thank you for, instead of ones your 6-0-year-old self will have to pay for. One question before you go, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. What's one financial decision you'd make differently if you could go back? Drop it below. I read every single one, and I think we learn more from each other's real experiences than from any financial expert. If this gave you something to think about like button, it helps more than you know. And if you want more content like this, the psychology of money, not just the mechanics, subscribe and turn on notifications. Your 40S aren't the end of your financial story. They're the chapter where you decide how it ends. Make it a good one.